Someone else.
Okay, good afternoon. I love it. Like some of those teacher things still work, right? I love it. Okay, thank you so much for your attendance today. We have our final closing kind of plenary session here. I'm going to do a small introduction. We'll get started, and then we have our kind of wrap up and thank yous at the end. So I do want to thank you guys so much for coming. I'm really excited about this session, so I feel like you guys are going to get a lot out of it. It's super engaging and fun. I'm totally not trying to talk it up. It really is, I promise. So let me introduce the speaker. So this is Eric Keller, this is Maureen, and Brett from the Dorcheo Center. It's a center we have, teaching and learning center. That's not all that they do, but it's amazing. And you, and I will let Eric kind of take over from there. So thanks guys for being here, so appreciate it.
Great. Well, thank you for having me. It's fun to be here. You're going to have to listen fast this afternoon. I know this is you're the diehards, the ones who went to the whole last session. I appreciate that. So I'll make it as fast. I just did this for in 4 hours last time, so I think we can get it down a little bit. We should be out of here by 7 or so. What I'm going to start with is right on your table you have a thing that you're not supposed to touch. Now I'm going to let you touch it. You can do anything with it except open it and look inside. And you can even open it, you just can't look inside. You can put your hand inside if you want. And don't, just among yourself, try to keep it to yourself at your table. Figure out what it is. What is it you have? No. We have some advice from this table, don't fight it. All right, enough. Just close it out for 45 seconds. All right, who wants to tell me what it is? What they think it is? Marbles. Marbles? Marbles? Give it in. Give it in. That's it. Gumball. All right, so we have some that say marbles, some that say peanut M&Ms, some that say gumball. Anybody? Any other thing?
Dollar store rubbery little
Squishy octopus.
Wait a minute. No. How can that be a squishy?
Yeah. Every bag.
Are you sure? Now, are you sure it's a gumball, or what do you think it is?
It's brown, but it felt a little sticky when I touched it, so that's why I thought it might be gumball.
Oh, well, he tasted it last. Somebody tasted it last. That's probably why it's sticky. All right, so why? So there's some there's some feeling there, there's some senses going on to say, oh, it maybe isn't a marble. And you're thinking it's a marble because you tasted it and it wasn't edible. And you, how do you, why feed it in? All right. And does it smell? How do you smell? And she doesn't, okay. And then, so what makes you think it's not though? And why dollar store?
Well, I purchased those for my children.
So there is some kind of experience.
Yes.
And your experience of tasting marbles as a child.
The rain and state.
So the truth is that all of you have marbles except this table and this table. All right? But it's your experiences that you are bringing to the table. And so we're going to talk today about some brain science. We're going to talk today about how we get things, ideas, information into long-term memory. None of us, I believe, none of us got into teaching just so our students would pass the test, right? We can get them to pass the test, but a week later, we ask them the same question, and they say, was that even in this class? And that really is not a good way to end the year teaching. We want our students to really get it, understand it, and know it, and that's what we're going to talk about today. So David Sosa, we have some books with David Sosa here, up here. It'll be fun to get over. David Sosa studies the brain. And in general, this is what Sosa is saying. I shouldn't call him my first name. I don't know him personally. Sosa is saying that our brain's job is to get rid of information. Not to capture information, it's to get rid of information. So you came in this room and you looked around and you said, okay, I don't really need to know what color that door is, so my brain doesn't think about the color of the door. I don't need to think about how many chairs are in the room. As long as I have a seat, there's enough, and your brain gets rid of that information. So we have sensory information. Sight, hearing, touch, smell, and taste. I let you use everything but your sight here today. So sometimes we enter into learning and we don't have certain senses. In fact, most of the time in our classrooms, we don't have feel, we don't have touch or taste in our rooms. We don't use those senses a lot of the time, but it's still part of our environment. And every one of the students, whether in an online environment or in a face-to-face environment, they are entering into the education space with all of their senses. And they come to us from certain sensory environments. Coming out of the rain, they're coming here tired, they're coming here, and it's hot in the room, it's cold in the room, it's loud in the room, it's not loud enough in the room, can't hear the teacher, I can only hear the person snoring next to me. And all of those senses are taking place. Now, what we know, what Sosa has learned, is this short-term sensory memory is really, really, really short, like a quarter of a second. That's how long your brain takes to decide if it's going to keep it or dump it. Keep it or dump it. And so you decide that, and then it's either dumped or it moves on. Now, if you have a chance to work with it, then it goes into your working memory. And working memory allows us to see 2 and another 2 and a plus sign between them, and we put that into our working memory and we decide that that's 4. That's a working memory. It's not something that needs to stay there a long, long time. It's just long enough for us to work with it. So more than a quarter of a second, but it could be 20, 30 seconds, it could be a couple minutes. It's working memory. It's working with it. As long as you're working with it, it's fine, and then your brain dumps it. Now, if your brain decides that you want to actually store the information and work with it later, then that's where the task comes in. How do we get people to work with that information long enough to put it into storage and then be able to retrieve it? That's long-term memory, and that's what we're all about. That's what we're going to talk about the rest of the 40 minutes. Okay? Any questions there? That's a really short version of Sosa's book. All right? So I want you to read it because it's really quite interesting. It's all about the brain. Take one of those 3x5 cards that Maureen and Brett handed out to you. And on the top of it, I want you to just think of a topic that you will teach. I don't know if any of you are teaching this summer. So let's say the next time you teach, maybe in the fall, maybe next week, maybe right now. In the next times you teach, next few topics, I want you to think of a difficult topic. And you know it's a difficult topic because most of the students didn't do well last time you tested on them, or you yourself struggle with how to get that concept across. All right? And so be honest, you're the only one reading this, but I want you to write it down, write the topic that you are thinking about on the top, because for the next 40 minutes, I'm going to ask you to think about that topic. All right. In the late 80s, John Sweller developed a theory called cognitive load theory. It was pretty exciting at the time, but about the mid-90s, cognitive load theory started to fade away. And the reason it faded away was because they really couldn't prove it. It made sense, but they couldn't actually prove it. And it wasn't until later that some of the brain research came out that it was actually indeed a very strong and solid theory. So just recently, in the last 5 years, cognitive load theory has started to make a rise, and I think it's worthy of us talking about as faculty because we want our students to get the information in long-term memory. How we do that is why this theory is really helpful. It's a really dry sounding name, cognitive load theory, but I think it's quite fun to talk about. So just briefly, I'm going to unpack all of these, but intrinsic load is the inherent complexity of the task. It's how difficult the task is. The extraneous load is outside influences, the environment and the delivery, and then the germane load is the effort put into constructing a permanent schema. I'm hoping, if time allows, to spend most of my time on this last one, but we have to understand these two first to get there. If we can grasp this sense of load, our mind having a load on it as it's learning, then we understand how our students are learning and getting things into long-term memory. So I see lots of blank looks. That's okay. It will unpack. I hope it will unpack. So intrinsic load. Who would like to come up here and do this task for me? You'd like to. So what do you teach? So, what's your name? Diana, when we think of the intrinsic load being the inherent, the inside load or difficulty, is this a real difficulty for you or it's pretty doable? All right. So, what's your name? Ryan? Yeah. Ryan, is this a difficult thing for you?
That's going to take us some time.
Okay, so what was your degree in?
English.
All right. But if I'm not mistaken, in order to get to your English degree, you went through high school. And where did you go to high school that didn't teach that?
They taught it.
But it's no longer there. All right. He didn't use it. And so it has now moved into an intrinsically difficult task for him. Diana, on the other hand, uses this information and she would be able to come up with the answer. So intrinsic load is dependent on the student. You can't just simply say it's always difficult for all people. Most of the time we're teaching it, and I should say most of the time, as the professor, I actually feel pretty comfortable with the topic. There have been a few times when I was just studying right ahead of my students, but most of the time I'm pretty comfortable with what I'm teaching. So it's the load's really light for me, but it's heavy for my students. So if you think about that topic, the math topic that was up there, you're thinking about your topic that you had written down. Diana, let me go back up forward. What are the assumptions as you start teaching a student how to do this? What are the assumptions that you have to have that they're going to do okay on?
Their previous knowledge.
And what? Give me some specifics. Do they have to know fractions, or they have to know derivatives?
Well, yeah. Right.
Okay, so they're going to have to know they're going to have to know something about derivatives. All of you know about derivatives, right? No, because you had it, you just forgot. There's some assumptions before she starts this unit, before she puts this problem before her students, that you have to have. If you put this problem before a second grader, they're going to look at it and look at it and look at it, and they're going to give up, except for the few that are real special kids. All right? Take a look at your topic now. I want you to write down at least 3 assumptions that you believe that your students need to know before they can handle that topic that you're going to teach.
Handling reading, how they're able to learn that topic.
How they're able to learn it, yeah, without big jumps. If it's too big of a jump,
Right.
then they're not going to get it. So what are some assumptions that are the scaffolding to get to that learning?
Where you want them to be in the course.
No, it's where I want them to be before you talk about that topic. Yeah.
I teach neuropsychology and biological psychology, so I'm assuming students that come to me know that.
Okay, well, that's okay then. That's the assumption. And you can say they have no prior knowledge of this topic, meaning they've never heard the word brain, they've never heard synapses, they've never heard anything.
They might have heard brain, but a lot of the other stuff they might not. They have their hippocampus. I mean, and they don't know what it means anyway. So they may have heard the word, but I think that's not even necessary.
So even in that, you have to, if you're going to teach something to them, you have to build a vocabulary, right? So that's an assumption that you're going to do that before you teach that topic. Okay, so now after you write down your assumptions, I want you to write down, can you verify that they actually learned that? And what are the possible resources for a student if those assumptions have not been met? So I'm going to give you an example. In short division, I'm going to believe that they have to know number patterns, add and subtract, and multiplication. If you're going to learn short division, this is a real simple topic. Can I verify that? Yes. I can do a pretty quick formative assessment right even early in the class time and find out, do they have those tasks down? Do they know number patterns? Can they add and subtract? And can they multiply? If they can do those 3, I can teach them about short division. But if they can't multiply, if they don't understand multiplication, it's really hard to teach division. And there are manipulatives that split up somehow. There are manipulatives that I can work with them and help them understand the concept behind multiplication before I teach them short division. All right, so write those down. your assumptions, can you verify the assumption, and what are the possible reasons? All right, does anybody want to share? Lisa?
My topic was on, I teach speech, and so it was teaching them to do working outlines. And I came in with the assumption that they knew how to make an outline and also how to find sources. And I found that that actually was not true. So I started doing actual why we subordinate and, you know, do the actual, why do we use Roman numerals? Why do we have A, B, C? Talked about the logic. And then I made a field trip to the library. Because I
So
realized my
your past experience was that you got to this topic and they didn't have the assumption, so now you're starting with that,
So I was super frustrated,
right?
thinking, how did they graduate high school and not understand this material, you know, understand a basic thesis statement?
Yeah, well, ask Ryan, because Ryan graduated from high school and didn't understand basic math. No, but yeah, he hadn't used it, right? So the same thing happens to us. They get there and they should have known it, but they didn't use it enough, so it's not embedded.
That makes a lot of sense now.
But you use it all the time.
Right.
Right. Any other?
So using just general knowledge of having lived to be about 18 in class. Obviously, they understand what a brain is, what the senses are,
Yeah.
that they are biological beings, and kind of starting from there as to how it explains and how it starts to function.
Right.
And how, yeah, so that would be, but there is kind of a general knowledge of, as human beings, that you have a certain idea of the structure, but not the details.
Right. And maybe even, they might even know what happens if something goes wrong in the neuroscience.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, and it depends on what kind of thing, you know, between traumatic.
So what's your topic? I mean, that particular individual.
Well, my specialty, I'm actually, as a cognitive psychologist, I do actually did a lot of research on cognitive load, so that's fun. So, you know, just basic, the biological function of the brain and the basic parts and what they kind of sort of do. And then how, if they do go wrong, I mean, and this would be like just a general psychology course, not the detailed graduate level course, but just giving them an idea that psychology is also a neuroscience and that it's hard science as well as that's why it's soft science.
Yeah. Well, be really careful because I about didn't get married because of general science. I went through a bunch of type testing and my wife looked, my fiance at the time said, I don't know if I want to marry you, but I think she did finally marry. All right, so the question is, how do we reduce the load? How do we drop that load down so we can have room for other things? We have to simplify it, we have to put it within reach. Video games are great, not because they actually teach us anything, but they're great to learn from as teachers because video games are masterful at the fact that the next level is not that far. It's, oh man, I almost had it. If I just go back and try it one more time, I can get it. And that's masterful. We have to get education to that point where it's the next level is just hard enough, but not too hard. Provide the right resources and scaffold. Build a scaffolding that allows your students to reach that level. So first of all, that's the scaffolding is this understanding what the assumptions are that they have to know to be here, finding out if they know it, and if they don't know it, get them. And the bigger the class, the harder that is, of course. But you have to, they're going to be unable to reach too high. Now, I want to move into extraneous load. extraneous load of those outside influences. And before we move into all of those types, let's just talk about the types of outside influences that are out of our control. What are some of those things that you think of? Yeah.
Blackboard interface.
Yes, out of our control. We can try to write letters and stuff like that, but for the today, it's out of our control. What else?
It's just their everyday worries, their financial worries, families.
Yes.
Just
Car broke down. Yeah. How many, let me ask, how many of you are online only, I mean, mostly online faculty? Okay. And the rest of you that I assume are face to face. Okay. What other influences that are out of our control? Weather. Can't help the weather.
Jobs, children, wife, spouse.
accident.
Yeah. Medical,
Limited goals.
hunger. You work with the school districts. There are nearby school district here has 1,000 students that are homeless, right? And they have to deal with hunger before those students can think about learning. And some students here come and they haven't had breakfast, they haven't had lunch, whatever. And on our campus too. Some of that's their own fault, some of that's not their own fault. But then there are things that are in our control. There are things that we bring into the equation in our, whether it's a lecture or a presentation or a dialogue, that we load up the student's mind incorrectly. So let's think about some of those. In the classroom environment, what's happening in this room? Sometimes you have the ability to control that, sometimes you don't. In the online environment, we can clutter. We can clutter the environment that they're looking at in such a way that they can't see the main point. What are some other things that you have control over?
Busy work.
Busy work, yeah. Get to the point, yeah.
I think like it's assignment instructions, like clear instructions, clear expectations.
Right. They're stressing over what does he or she really want me to do? That's extraneous.
Pacing and deadlines.
Pacing, yeah. Deadlines that are reasonable. Is that what you're thinking? Yeah. Safety. Safety is a big one in classes. It is true that there's safety issues in some classes for, are we going to get hurt here or not hurt here? That's not the only safety. More of the time, especially in college level classes, the question is, am I safe to express my ideas? Is this an environment of safety? Can I ask questions safely? Can I interact with the faculty? Can I interact with my fellow students safely? Hunger is a big one. Others, there's a whole bunch of things. I think the presentation is a really big issue. Let me talk about how to reduce the load. So what did the giraffe and the sound have to do with anything to do with coherence for you? Not a thing.
Demonstrated that.
It demonstrated the lack of coherence for you. It wasn't what was happening on the screen and what was happening in the speakers was not coherent with what I was talking about. Therefore, your brain was unable to carry all of that information. And so it's trying to figure out, what do I listen to, what do I look at, and what is important here. The signaling principle, drawing the eye where you need the eye to look. Trying not to put too much on the screen, but pulling the eye where the eye needs to be at the time. Redundancy principle. Can you say it? Can you see it? Can you do it in multiple ways? Here we have redundancy. AU equals gold, and you have a schema in your mind of what gold looks like. Silver, second place, and mercury. So you see those are redundancy items. How can you bring those things out multiple times? And then I'm going to talk about spatial contiguity and temporal contiguity together. Here, rather than bring everything up, we're going to bring them in at the time that they're needed to talk about. So you're bringing them and you're spacing them. I didn't put the picture of Mercury up here. I put them in the right order, and I put them there at the right time. Rather than put them all up at the same time. Most of the time, what we end up doing is putting too much on the screen, or we put that up things that don't really need to be there. The second thing that happens a lot is putting something on the screen that you're not talking about and expecting students to both read what's on the screen and listen to what you're saying at the same time. I know that students tell us that they can multitask, but that is not actually possible. Now, your brain is a great switcher, and you can go back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. But if you really want them to pay attention to what's on the screen, and you're not going to talk about it, just put it up on the screen and wait. And then when they're done reading it, you can start in again. But you cannot expect them to take notes or imagine what's important on a big screen and what you're saying. That makes sense? All right, now, that was the introduction. Germane load. This is what we want students to get the information to, the point at which we get the information to, so that it's an easy load. That makes sense? It's instinct. It's part of it. It's something else that's kind of fluffy that I can say.
Mayday, this is catch 5029. Hit first, we've lost thrust on both engines and we are turning back towards the board. Which engine did you lose? Both. Ignition. First left. For idle.
Catch 1549, we get a few, turn land runway 13.
We are unable, we remain up in the house.
This is going to be about traffic, runway 31.
Unable.
Okay, what do you need to land?
No reload after 30 seconds of investor 1 and 2 confirm all off. This is the captain. Brace for impact.
Was he panicked? What was he doing?
Assessment.
He was focusing, he was assessing,
And there's also,
critical thinking.
there was also some automated process there, because this was, during, it was the experience stuff. And that we find pretty typical of why we train soldiers the way we do.
Yes.
It's we train them, it's why we train first responders the way we do. This is what you do in this situation. And so much of that is automatic.
Yes.
And then to be able to craft the experience, bring that in, and then match then your decision.
So the reason he was able to do the critical thinking was because all of those other tasks were in his automation. He could go through the checklists, he could go, all of those checklists were in his germane load, so that he could give all of his attention to the critical thing, because that particular situation had never happened in the history of aviation. They had not been able to train for that specific problem. No one had ever imagined both engines showing. And yet, there they were. and they train and they train and they put it into that germane load. That is what we want people to do. We want them to work with that critical thinking. We want them to be in that critical thinking arena in our classroom. But in order to do that, we've got to get this other stuff into a more germane, a easier access.
It kind of goes into the 4 stages of confidence, right, from psychology.
Absolutely.
You know, it's conscious confidence or unconscious confidence. I mean, you're kind of moving through those stages based upon where you're at in your skills or learning or, yeah.
And there's this proximal zone of development, right?
Yeah.
And we are expecting them to be at a certain level. If we want them to go harder, what their foundation has to be solid.
Yeah.
All right, we don't have time to look at that whole thing, but my granddaughter just started learning walking 2 weeks ago, so that's on her, but it's the same problem. That big of a lip is a difficult challenge. And so if you talk to her while she's trying to walk, it's like, okay, somebody talk to me, I'm gonna fall. You're like, I'm thinking about where my feet are going. For that little girl, walking was not in her germane load. I can walk without thinking about it, and I can't walk and chew gum, but I can walk and talk. All right, here's two lists. I'm gonna give you these lists. I want you to bring out a piece of blank paper or something that you can write on really quick. I'm gonna show you this list shortly, just a short while. I want you to look at them very carefully, and then it's gonna go away, and I'm gonna ask you to write the list down, okay? All right, are you ready? Everybody got a piece of paper? Got a pencil? You better put your pencil in your hand, because you gotta be ready. Okay, good. All right, here we go. Okay, write those down. Okay, we got it? Anybody still writing? Okay, list number 2. You guys ready? Are you ready? Okay, let's check your understanding. How many got 3 on this one? How many got 4? Anybody got 5? Okay. How many got 3 on group list 2? Oh, more. And how many have got 4? 5? 6? How many are 7? Did you get them all?
6.
Yay. Why? Now, why? Is it just because in list 1 you weren't ready?
Yes, that was part of it. I'm also a real fast typer. And I knew that. I mean, these are things that I'm all familiar with.
That's exactly right. How many of you actually know what XCN is? It's not in your schema. It wasn't there for your mind to grasp and know what it was so you can move on to the next thing. So when you looked at that first list, you said in your brain, XCN. And then you went to the next NBG. But when you looked over here, you said CNN as one thought process. That is because this list, for the most part, has become so familiar to you over the years that you could do it. I just did this workshop 2 weeks ago in Iraq. They knew this list. That's how familiar those acronyms are. So, I want you to say this out loud. Don't worry about paper. Just yell it out to me. You're going to look at the screen. You're going to tell me how many dots are on the screen.
3.
5. 6. 6. 5. 8. 6. 6.
You count really fast. So I didn't hear anybody going 1, 2, 3. How did you count those so fast? Groups, pairs. So when you, let's look at this one. What did you see? 2 sets of 3, all right? Did anybody see 4 and 2, or? We see those patterns differently. If I go back to it, you find that there's a lot of differences on how we see the patterns, but over time you have developed ways to make patterns because your kindergarten teacher was really good. And they helped you develop those patterns early on. So thank the kindergarten teacher that you don't have to go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. You have developed a schema. And what we're trying to do is, if it's really important, it's important enough to be on your syllabus, we want people to develop a schema about that so that they can recognize those patterns just as easily on the topic that you're teaching. We want them to, when they hear the word outline, we want them to see Roman numeral 1, big A, little a, and or some sort of, unless you're teaching something else. All right, what do you see here? Dog and a cow, right? Any disagreement? Okay, what do you see now? What was it? It was a zebra? A dog? You say a zebra, you say a dog. Who is it?
Painted like a zebra.
All right, it's a dog. But your schema, you knew it was an animal right away. You knew it had 4 legs, and you'd seen a dog and you'd seen a cow, and black and white stripes and zebra. Your brain goes there really quickly, and you make some assumptions, and then you jump from there. This is how we do schema language. So, back to the top. Your intrinsic load plus your extrinsic load, extraneous load, excuse me, plus your germane load cannot be greater than your working memory. You get that? Otherwise, it's over. What we want to do is we want to manage the intrinsic load. As you begin teaching, ask yourself, do I have good instructional sequence? Have I gotten them to the place where they can actually learn this without making too great a jump? Now manage the intrinsic load. Then I'm going to reduce the extraneous load as much as I can. There are points at which we can't do anything about the weather. And I'm going to design my instruction so that I don't bring in the instruction things that don't matter. And I had some professors that love to get sidetracked, with storytelling that has nothing to do with what they're teaching. Great storytellers. We laugh, remember the stories, have no idea what they're teaching. And we're going to increase the germane load. Maximize what they know, so if they know these things and they have, I say, hangers in which to hang the information I'm giving them. If I have ways to connect it to their lives, I'm going to use their germane load. And if they don't have those hangers, I'm going to try to get them something. I'm going to try to help them find ways that this becomes a natural rhythm of learning. And we do that for allowing them to work with it. We allow them to touch it, smell it, see it, or walk with it, all kinds of things. And then that gets into learning, all right? It moves it in there to the working memory, and then you actually are starting. Yes, any questions? I did pretty good. 4 hours and 44 minutes.
This is from my experience in the research.
Yeah.
The germane and the ability to take on new cognitive load differs individually. So we have some people, so we have some people that can take it on, and younger brains are much better at it than older brains. But we do find that it's one of the things we were trying to do for rehabilitation, is actually being able to increase that cognitive, the ability to take on cognitive load for traumatic brain. So I know there's going to be a little difference. So how would you suggest incorporating that in terms of teaching? I know how to do it for rehabilitation.
Right. Yeah, and the cool thing about rehabilitation is most of the time you're working one-on-one.
Right.
And you don't have 20, 30, 40 people trying at different levels of understanding. The most simple way to start is having, especially if you're teaching online or you have online resources, having the ability to show your students where the resources are if this is too difficult for them. If you haven't met these assumptions, let them do their self-testing. If you don't know this already, here's where you go. Not to me. We're working with some K-12 schools to try to help the students recognize that their first avenue of learning is not to put your hands up and ask the teacher to come to you. The first avenue is a different way. We have different skills we teach them at different levels. But that, I think, is the first thing, is to have resources, have a formative assessment that they can self-assess themselves so that they can go to those resources. That's probably where you're going to get the biggest bang for your buck.
One variable that we can't control is time between courses. And I teach research courses, and somewhere in their undergraduate, they learn APA. I teach them, just taught an introductory research class. By the end, they have the reference sheet pretty good. They're in text, some resemblance of APA. They got it together. Now they're not going to take advanced research for another year. And I know from experience, when they're in there, it's like they haven't had introductory research. The APA goes out the window.
They haven't used it for a year.
Right.
Oh.
There's academic classes that
Yeah.
level research.
Well, this doesn't, my first answer is, doesn't make very much sense for adjuncts. I probably shouldn't even mention it because it'll just frustrate you. But the biggest way to help with stuff that's so core to, like introductory to research, we want them to learn in every class, right? So you should, if in a perfect world, what you taught them in introductory should be reinforced in everybody else's class. But it's not. So second is do you have a way for them to review year one on their own time rather than you reteaching year one in the first 2 weeks?
I think just from what you were presenting, I got an idea, and that is the formative assessment. I know in one of my doctoral classes, they had us take a test on APA. It was self-graded and used as a learning tool, but it made me cognizant of where my own APA level was. I think that might be helpful.
What percentage of your students go from introductory to advanced?
All of them.
All of them. So if you can prep them at the end of year one, prep their brains. I mean, tell them right up front, this is going to happen to you. And say, you have to remember this for a year. And here's how you do it. You use it in your classes. You practice it. Keep these notes. I would probably tell them at the beginning of the year that you have to grasp this for 2 full years.
More importantly, I give them feedback individually on their work. This, any corrections they make at the end of the year, this will need to be, perfected by advanced research. So they have that. Their students. A year later.
Yeah. All right, one more question, then I'm going to turn it back to
Jesse's out in the hall.
So something like distributed cognition, where you don't require students to even memorize APA. You just say, here's a resource. Anytime you need to know the format, just look there, use it, and let it go. Forget it. I mean, why do we have to make them memorize everything? Especially the day of Google.
Yeah, we know, and the question is that's the big question. What do we want them to memorize so that it takes a load off their brain for learning other things.
So can you replace intrinsic load with
Google?
training load? In other words, you provide that work aid. Can one replace the other?
Yeah, so you're balancing, right? You're saying A plus B plus C equals B.
Right.
And so can you drop A? Can you increase A if you have more?
If you supplement it with it.
That actually the formula is A plus B minus C equals B, because domain load drops the load, right? Yeah, I mean, the more,
So you can outsource that knowledge to the environment.
if you can do that, you're helping that process, right?
And we actually,
So custom.
studies have shown that we actually do that. So Western cultures we have far worse memories than people in cultures where the spoken language is how they transfer information.
Right.
As our technology's gotten better, I used to be so good at doing mathematics in my head, and then I got a calculator. So it's the same kind
I
of
remember
concept.
my wife is number one, my mom is number two.
Right, so it's the same concept, and we don't remember going numbers anymore, but we know that we have that ability. It's like you were talking about APA when in research that I've done, in publication I've done, it could be a different type of footnotes or references, then it's not just the APA. So I don't bother memorizing it. I just use endnotes and go, oh, I'm submitting this gesture, and all they use this genre. So I'm going to use. So I think you're right.
Alexa, tell me where my kids are.
Right. So it's teaching them. We know we have this technology, so why not allow them to continue to use that technology, knowing it's always going to be there, as long as they know how to use that, and then get to the
Go deep in.
or the deep stuff. I'd rather them do that than read that.
Okay, thank you all.
So thank you, Eric, very much. We're going to learn so much at the end of the day, right? Because normally this is the time where everybody's like, oh, I don't feel like that's coming on, or like a third cup of coffee, right? You know how that feels? Awesome. Okay, well, we are going to kind of move into the last little bit of our day. We definitely want to try to get you out of here by 5, so we just have a few things left here at the very end. We have some thank yous and some wrap up that we're going to do. So just give us just a couple of minutes as we're going to transition. But if we give the Chair Center one more round of applause for
I'm doing the fake news. All right. Well, we'll start. We've got some fun. I think did we already get some? Stephanie and no. No. Okay. So for our presenters this morning, thank you to Paul and yeah, even more. Okay, and then for the details, and I can talk someone as well. So thank you very much. And then for our presenters, are all our presenters still here? Some of them are.